PR Connections Radio presents
Welcome to Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian McKelly. And what a great time it is. NFL season is getting closer and closer and closer. And on this episode of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I'm not just going to give you one team, not two teams, not a trio, but four separate teams that I believe are going to exceed expectations heading into 2023. Four teams that are going to surprise you in the upcoming NFL year. And I'm also going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders a little bit, seeming that we are in Las Vegas, Nevada, the sports entertainment capital of the world. And, of course, you have Allegiant Stadium, one of the best stadiums in the NFL, right behind me. But until then, go to thesportsangle.com. Check out all the articles and all the audio and video links we have on there. We wrote an article recently talking about the MLB draft and mentioning the connection to the state of Nevada and the MLB draft. So go read that article on thesportsangle.com. I also want to say for all audio listeners on iHeartRadio and Spotify, turn on notifications and hit the subscribe button so you not miss any episode of the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Also, for all people on YouTube, go to our channel, hit the notification bell, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate all of your support here on PRConnectionsRadio.com. So getting into the NFL conversation, let's get into the first team that is going to surprise you in 2023. The first team that is going to really exceed expectations heading into the year, and I'm a big fan of this team. I believe that they have a lot of potential, and that team is going to be the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans on the surface, there isn't a lot you can really talk about. All right, when you are just looking at it from a normal view, when you look at it just from the straight and narrow, the Houston Texans are supposed to be pretty bad this upcoming year. There isn't a lot of promise. There isn't a lot of expectations. However, the one upside the Houston Texans have is all of the new weapons the Houston Texans have acquired in this past offseason. The reason why I have the Houston Texans as a team that has exceeded expectations heading into the year is how great of an offseason the Houston Texans had. All of the good acquisitions the Houston Texans have made, how they did a really solid job during the NFL draft, and more importantly, what the Houston Texans did in terms of hiring their head coach. They brought in a former Houston Texan. They brought in a former player to be their head coach in DeMeco Ryans. Now, DeMeco Ryans, he was a really solid linebacker in his career, played for Houston, played for Philadelphia. Then he became an assistant coach in San Francisco and helped the San Francisco 49ers defense become one of the best defenses in the NFL. So they hired DeMeco Ryans to lead the Houston Texans. They takes over from Lovie Smith. And by the way, I still love Lovie Smith, Chicago Bears legend. He always will be. But DeMeco Ryans has a lot of potential. There's some good upside there for DeMeco Ryans. Not only does he have a relationship with the Houston Texans, not only is he in with the community based off of what he did when he was a player, but he can also take some styles and schemes from the San Francisco 49ers and model it to what the Houston Texans are going to do. And one very important part, DeMeco Ryans being a former linebacker, that means that he is going to be a defensive-minded coach. The Houston Texans are going to be a lot better defensively with DeMeco Ryans. Now, when I said the Houston Texans added weapons, they really have. Like, this offseason was incredible for the Houston Texans. They made a lot of good steps in the right direction. So let's just focus on the defense for a sec, and then let's get to the offense. Because not only did they make one of the boldest and gutsiest trades at the NFL draft, trading up with Arizona to get Will Anderson from University of Alabama, they are also going to have him be their face of the defense for the Houston Texans. And if Will Anderson turns out to be the player he is supposed to be coming out of Alabama, he could be their next J.J. Watt. He could be their next Mario Williams. Someone who is going to hold down the defense for the Houston Texans and be a leader on that team. So Will Anderson was a solid move for them. They also brought in veteran help like Jerry Hughes, the former Buffalo Bill, now with the Houston Texans. This is going to be a guy who's underrated, under the radar, but he is a veteran that's being brought in to help the defense out. I think that's a solid move by the Houston Texans. They also brought over Sheldon Rankins, the former top pick back with the New Orleans Saints. He's getting a second chance playing with the Houston Texans. Once again, these are not major moves, but they are solid moves by the Houston Texans. I like what they did defensively. I think what they have done in terms of style and scheme fit has been great. And I really expect the Houston Texans to do a lot better than what they did the year before. I really expect DeMeco Ryans to add 4 or 5 more wins to this Houston Texans team this upcoming year. So the first team I expect to have a massive turnaround and exceed expectations is the Houston Texans. But while we're talking about the defense, bringing over Denzel Perryman from the Las Vegas Raiders, another veteran, smart move there. Christian Kirksey brought him over. They came from Cleveland and Green Bay. He is a veteran in that locker room. And they also have Derek Stingley Jr., who in year 2 is going to blossom and develop as their number 1 corner in Houston. So the Houston Texans have done pretty well. I also have to mention them getting Jimmy Ward for the San Francisco 49ers. It would be a very bad situation if I did not include that. The fact that San Francisco 49ers, Jimmy Ward, he had been there his whole career. He got a bag to go to the Houston Texans, and he is going to be their good safety for the next couple of while. Now, I mentioned the defense here, but what about the offense? How has the offense improved with the Houston Texans? Well, you got to look at the offensive line for starters. Laremy Tunsil has been one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, and they just locked him up again and gave him a lot of money to be their left tackle and to help protect their rookie quarterback, their face of the franchise. That was a smart move. You also have a situation where Shaq Mason is at right guard. The New England Patriot, the guy who won multiple championships with Tom Brady. He is now with the New England Patriots. He is going to be their right guard. Solid move by them. They're also former first-round pick in Howard. He's going to be at right tackle. So the left guard and center, yes, there's some question marks there, but you have a cornerstone at left tackle. You have a former champion at right guard, and you have a constant first-round pick at right tackle. So the Houston Texans did well offensive line-wise. Tight end. They called up the Dallas Cowboys, and they said, we want your tight end, and we're going to give him a lot of money to come over to Houston. That's what they did with Dalton Schultz. He is a solid tight end, not too flashy, but he gets the job done. He will get some good catches. He is someone that's going to be reliable for C.J. Stroud, and I think that it's going to be incredible for the Houston Texans moving forward. And I also have to point out, Robert Woods is a veteran receiver that's going to be boom or bust for them. If Robert Woods performs like he did with the Rams and did with the Bills, he'll do pretty well. But if he performs like he did with the Titans, Nah, not so much. The running back position, they have a 1-2 punch of Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary. And I have to mention that Singletary got brought over from the Buffalo Bills. So Dameon Pierce, a young up-and-coming running back. Houston Texans took him a while ago. And Singletary, hey, not a bad 1-2 punch in Houston. And lastly, the quarterback situation in Houston, I think that's pretty good. You have Case Keenum, the veteran quarterback, the guy who has been there forever. He's been part of Houston for a long time. You have Davis Mills, who was their starting quarterback last 2 years. And you have CJ Stroud, the number one quarterback from last year's draft. He went number 2 overall to the Houston Texans. So I say the reason why I have the Houston Texans exceeding expectations, their head coach, DeMeco Ryans, is going to make them better. The offense has improved, and the defense has picked up solid veterans on the team. But that was only the first team I'm talking about. That is the first team I believe is going to exceed expectations and do better this upcoming year. But number 2 is going to surprise a few people. Number 2 is going to surprise some people because I'm a Chicago Bears fan. I've openly admitted that. And I openly admit that the Green Bay Packers have been a problem for me for almost 20 years. But gosh dang it, I like that roster. I really believe the Green Bay Packers have a solid shot at winning the NFC North. And more importantly, I trust what the Green Bay Packers are going to do in terms of long-term situation. Let me explain what I mean. Everybody wants to talk about Jordan Love. All right, Jordan Love, they drafted him in the first round. He is their new starter, replacing Aaron Rodgers. Oh, what's he going to do? What's he not going to do? I mean, people want to talk about Jordan Love and how he's a question mark. But nobody ever wants to ask the second part of the question, which is, how is the team built around Jordan Love? How has the roster been constructed around Jordan Love? What weapons does he have in Green Bay? Because a lot of people tend to forget that the Green Bay Packers over the last few years have been building that roster from within. Their receivers are young and up and coming. Their running backs, their 1-2 punch, were both drafted by Green Bay. Their offensive line, a lot of those guys were drafted by Green Bay. So it's no question mark that the Green Bay Packers have built a really good team around Jordan Love. And I feel a lot of people forget that. I also have to mention that they have the best defense in the NFC North. Green Bay is up here, and Detroit, Minnesota, and Chicago are absolutely down here in terms of defense. Detroit hasn't gotten better. Minnesota is going to be terrible, and Chicago is too young. So by default, Green Bay has the best defense in that division. So you factor in a solid offensive line. You factor in some young receivers, a good 1-2 punch of running back, and you have a defense that is better and leaps and bounds better than what Chicago, Detroit, and Minnesota have. This should not be a question mark as to why the Green Bay Packers are going to do better. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, I'm going to give a lot of props to, by the way. Aaron Jones has been a lifesaver if you play fantasy football. A.J. Dillon is a solid third down back. He will get certain touches throughout the year. And when it came to receivers for the Green Bay Packers, yeah, Christian Watson. But what about Dobbs? What about Wicks? What about Reed? A lot of people are trying to forget that right now. And are you shocked by including the Green Bay Packers? I hope you are. I'm going to give props to my biggest rival because I believe Green Bay is going to win that division. About a month from now, we are going to do a preview show here on the NFL. We are going to do our season preview here for the Sports Angle. This will be the 5th year in a row we are going to do a season preview here on Sports Angle. We started in 2019. We did 2020, 2021, 2022, and now we're going to do 2023 as well. And make no mistake about it, when it comes to our NFL season preview, I will bring some guests on. I'll bring on some very knowledgeable analysts from the NFL, people who know the game of football, and that's going to be a fun show. That's going to happen about in the middle of August, so I would definitely stay tuned for that. But the Green Bay Packers have a valid argument to win the NFC North. The Green Bay Packers have a solid argument to be a 10-win team in 2023. A lot of it, yes, does surround Jordan Love. I get it. But not many people want to give credit to the rest of that roster. Somebody mentioned on Twitter, what do you think about the Detroit Lions? Honestly, I think they're overrated. I mean, if I had to put 4 teams up on there that I think are overrated heading into the year, the first one is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville Jaguars, everyone is riding the Trevor Lawrence train. Pause on that. I think that when it comes to Jacksonville Jaguars, this is a team that so many people expect them to make a deep playoff run when they won't even make it out of the first round if they make it to the playoffs. So, I will say when it comes to teams that I find underrated, teams I think are going to exceed expectations, we already mentioned Houston and we mentioned Green Bay. But 2 teams I think are overrated and are definitely being overhyped at this point is Jacksonville and Detroit. These 2 teams, these 2 fan bases are being blown out of the water in terms of how well they're going to be heading into next year. But let's get back to reality real quick. Let's get back to the actual conversation. I mentioned how the Houston Texans and Green Bay Packers are going to exceed expectations. But what about a team that makes the playoffs every year? How would they exceed expectations? What about a team that is young but experienced? What about an organization that has among the best pedigree in NFL? What about a team that was not an original 6 team, but has the prestige and the legacy of an original 6 team? The next team I'm talking about, obviously, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kenny Pickett is going to be the biggest part of this conversation. I get it. Kenny Pickett is going to have an incredible year, but I believe he will. Kenny Pickett showed flashes in his rookie year. Kenny Pickett showed why he was the only rookie quarterback taken in the first round in 2022. Because Kenny Pickett was leaps and bounds better than Malik Willis. Better than James Ritter. Kenny Pickett was able to show that if you give him time in the pocket, if you give him an ability to make plays, he can get you there. I also have to mention the running back, Najee Harris. Najee Harris has become one of the best running backs over the past 2 years. Him coming from Alabama, he was taken in the first round by Pittsburgh 2021, and over the last 2 years, he has steadily become a reliable and durable running back in the NFL. I think Najee Harris is also going to have a top 5 season in terms of running backs. I truly believe he will. The receivers, George Pickens is going to show potential. I think he is going to take off in terms of performance this year. I also have to give a mention real quick to guys like Johnson and Washington. Those guys are going to make some good progress with Pittsburgh. And I also have to say, Pat Freiermuth, he is going to be a cornerstone. He's going to be a rock that I almost said George Pickett. I say that when it comes to Pat Freiermuth, he is going to be that rock that Kenny Pickett is going to rely on throughout the year. And the Pittsburgh Steelers made a very wise choice, a smart choice. The Pittsburgh Steelers decided that they were going to build that offensive line and they were going to do it by any means necessary. And how did the Pittsburgh Steelers do this, you might ask? They did it by drafting his blind side. They drafted Broderick Jones with a first-round pick. That's how you protect your quarterback, by getting him a left tackle that's going to protect him for the next 4 or 5 years. You also brought over a left guard for the Philadelphia Eagles, a guy who just got to a Super Bowl. They spent money and got him. They also brought over James Daniels from the Chicago Bears at right guard. So the Pittsburgh Steelers had a fantastic offseason. Not to mention, they brought over Allen Robinson on a cheap deal to be at receiver. So when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I have no complaints about this team. I think this team's going to do pretty well. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to make a statement right here, right now. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be the 7th and final seed in the AFC. I will not be shocked at all if the Pittsburgh Steelers find a way to be the final seed in the AFC. Regardless if that's 9-8 or 10-7, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make the playoffs in 2023. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make it back to the postseason for the first time in a mind-blowing 2 years. Somebody mentioned the defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way. Yeah, them having Cameron Hayward back, he has been there forever. He's a veteran in the locker room. They need him there. Also having TJ Watt back, coming back from injury, one of the best defensive players in the league. You can't forget about him. Joey Porter, drafting him in the draft, teaming him up with Patrick Peterson, a future Hall of Famer. That is good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they have a top 5 safety in Minkah Fitzpatrick. So teams I believe are going to exceed expectations. The first one was the Houston Texans. The second one was the Green Bay Packers. And the last one was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, technical difficulties, folks. Unfortunately, this stuff does happen. It's live, folks. Anything can happen. But yeah, back here on Sports Angle at PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And as we were talking about teams that I believe are going to exceed expectations in 2023, I have to mention the Seattle Seahawks. They are the last team I'm going to mention. Now, there are people who are really undervaluing the Seattle Seahawks. There are people out there who are not talking about this team enough in the NFL. Not only do they have a good quarterback in Geno Smith, but they have a fantastic running back in Kenneth Walker. They have a good trio in JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant at tight end. You have him as well. They have an offensive line that's been built around second-year offensive tackle Charles Cross. Defensively, They're rebuilding the Legion of Boom. You have Tyreek Woolen, Keandre Diggs, Jamal Adams. You also have the corner they took this year, Devon Witherspoon. So when it comes to the Seattle Seahawks, I am not going to be shocked at all if they make a leap in the NFL. If they take that next step up and challenge for the NFC crown. I mean, it's a Seattle Seahawks team that, unlike the San Francisco 49ers, I know who their quarterback's going to be week one. There's no doubt in my mind that their quarterback is going to be there in week one. Unlike the Arizona Cardinals, they're not overpaying for their quarterback. Geno Smith is getting paid very accordingly in Seattle. And unlike the Rams, the Seattle Seahawks aren't tearing down their roster only after 2 years. So the Seattle... So when it comes to Seattle Seahawks, I look at them and I say, this is a fantastic team. I like what they're doing. Pete Carroll should get a lot of credit for what he's doing. And I will say that when it comes to John Snyder, the general manager and president of football operations, he has done an incredible job with Seattle. I give him all of his props. You know what? Geno Smith had an amazing year last year. I think he will replicate it this upcoming year. Geno Smith is going to have a second year of being a fantastic quarterback in the NFL. The Seattle Seahawks are going to be a fantastic team to watch. They're actually going to be my go-to team to watch this year. The Seattle Seahawks are going to be a team I'm going to be watching on Sundays and potentially Mondays when on the Monday Night Football. Because the Seattle Seahawks are entertaining, they're fun to watch, and they have the loudest fan base in the NFL. That 12th man, ever been to Seattle, you know the 12th man is legit in Seattle. And by the way, not to pivot, but shout out to Seattle, by the way. This is one of my favorite cities of all time. I mean, Las Vegas is clearly number one, but Seattle would definitely be up there in terms of my favorite cities I've ever been to. So Seattle Seahawks, I definitely have to give them a lot of credit, but also the city of Seattle too. Seattle Kraken making it to the Stanley Cup playoffs, getting past Colorado in the first round, losing to Dallas in the second round. A lot of great potential for the Seattle Kraken. You also have the Seattle Sounders in the MLS. You have the Seattle Storm in the WNBA. The Seattle Mariners finally over 500, competing in the AL West. And you also have the NBA team in Seattle that's trying to come back thanks to the NBA expansion. So Seattle, I will give them always their props. I always will have kind of a soft spot in my heart for the city of Seattle. But back to what we're talking about. So the 4 teams I believe are going to exceed expectations. I have the Houston Texans, the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Seattle Seahawks. And then the 2 teams I have that are overrated heading into the year are the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Detroit Lions. Now, if you want to agree or disagree, go in the chat below. Go to prconnectionsradio.com, Voice of New Media. Give us your angle. But I also want to mention one last thing before we go off the air. And people have been asking, will the Raiders turn it around? Will the Raiders find a way to be able to fix the situation they have now? Let me explain what's going on here in Las Vegas in case you don't know. Jimmy Garoppolo, is he going to be a starting quarterback? Is he not going to be a starting quarterback? There's so many question marks there. Josh Jacobs not reporting to camp. Josh Jacobs holding out. He wants to get a long-term deal. Honestly, he deserves a long-term deal. Josh Jacobs has done a fantastic job with the Las Vegas Raiders. I give him his props. Devontae Adams, will he get traded at some point? Will it be at the trade deadline? Will it be this next offseason? There's a lot of question marks with the Las Vegas Raiders. And will they turn it around? I hope they do. I hope Tyree Wilson becomes the rookie they all hope. I hope that Michael Mayer becomes an incredible tight end coming out of Notre Dame. The offensive line should be able to hold up and be steady. Max Crosby will be an all-pro guy once again. But the Las Vegas Raiders, will they turn it around? It really just depends on two guys. Who your starting quarterback is, and are you going to pay Josh Jacobs what he is owed? Are you going to pay Josh Jacobs what he has earned as a running back in the NFL? Until those questions are answered, I really can't answer this question for you. Because I believe they can turn it around, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work and dedication for the Las Vegas Raiders. So I will say, for everybody watching around the world, I obviously have a lot of respect. So somebody just asked me on social media, who are your 5 greatest NFL players of all time? Like, who are the 5 players that you would have ranked as the greatest, as the GOAT of all time? Well, that one's kind of easy for me, so I'm just going to put it out of the way. At number 5, I have Reggie White. Reggie White played for the Green Bay Packers, played for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was the most dominant defensive end we had seen in NFL history. Reggie White was always a force to be reckoned with, regardless if he was playing in Philadelphia, regardless if he was winning Super Bowls in Green Bay. Reggie White was somebody that you had to watch out for every single night in the NFL. So he's number 5. Number 4 would be LT, Lawrence Taylor, the most dominant defensive player of all time, the greatest defensive player of all time. This guy broke as many rules as possible and created a lot of rules as well in the NFL playbook. So Lawrence Taylor would be number 4. Number 3, that would be Jerry Rice for the San Francisco 49ers. His hands, his ability to score touchdowns, his ability to make plays on down the field. Jerry Rice was a fantastic player. He was one of the greats. I would have him at 3. At 2, I would have Tom Brady. Look, there's no nice way to put it. Tom Brady set the game up for life. He was the trendsetter. But at number 1, the GOAT, the greatest football player of all time, and that is Jim Brown from the Cleveland Browns. All right, Jim Brown, for what he did in his career, he had 8 All-Pro selections in 9 years. He was the all-time rushing leader for 8 out of 9 seasons. Jim Brown, if he had played more seasons, he would have been incredible. So that is what I say the 5 greatest football players of all time are. Jim Brown at 1, Tom Brady at 2, Jerry Rice at 3, Lawrence Taylor at 4, and Reggie White at 5. So this was an edition of Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli, and we are going to be doing a longer episode tomorrow here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. So until next time, have a good one.